Welcome to the Ocean Tribe Hangout, where we chat with water humans from across the world. We focus on passion, representation, and most importantly, inspiring the world to venture into the most beautiful place, the ocean. Let's tuck in.
Hi guys! Welcome to the live. So yesterday, Shark, Jenny and I tried to have a conversation and it just went crazy. So we decided that we'd redo it just because it's so important. And I see she's on the line. Yay! And without all further ado, so first things first, we decided to do this live a little bit earlier because just in case we get load shedding again at the same time. But also too, this is an important discussion. So I really want us to have it. I really want to have the discussion, but it's also an incredible opportunity to educate. So, let's do it.
Yeah, for sure. And if anyone has any questions, I'm always happy to answer them. So feel free to drop a comment or to send me a DM or whatever. But I'm always happy to answer questions about shark. And I could talk about them for hours. So, I probably won't be able to fit everything in here.
No, I'm with you. So yesterday I was having a chat with someone and they were like, oh my word, you sound so passionate. And I said, the problem is, I don't know if you've seen that meme. It's on the internet where someone has like a cup of coffee and they say this, like they are the coffee. And then the saucer, they're like throwing all over the coffee, all over the saucer. And they're like, anyone who will listen about the ocean and about freediving. And I was just like, that's me.
Yeah,
That's
and exactly. And it's me too. And whenever I get, whenever someone asks me what I do, it automatically leads to a conversation, which is one of the things that I love so much because I end up having conversations with taxi drivers or people in shops, about sharks. And I just think it's such an amazing way to spread the love and the awareness as well. So conversations are amazing.
And that's just it, right? And as their eyes get big, your eyes get big, and then you like, it's insane. So
Yes.
Let's start again. Tell us what is your thing? What is your passion giver? What is your life bringer? What is your life's work, your mission? What is it?
Yeah. Cool. So, and again, thank you so much for having me today. So I am, I'm French and British, and I grew up by the sea, and my love for my thing that gives me joy in life is the ocean, is sharks, and it's people, and it's those three things together. So really the ocean community, and I'm incredibly passionate about sharks, and how important they are to our oceans and to us, and how we can live in harmony with them. So really those things give me so much joy. Being at the beach, on the beach, in the water, on the water, anything to do with oceans just gives me so much love.
I love that so much because, and I mean, yesterday again, I said, when you say ocean and you say sharks and you say people, it's such a fantastic mix because, and for me, it goes back to, I've traveled a lot alone and I love solo travels just because it's a great opportunity to meet people that you don't know, people who walk a completely different life to lives that you've ever known. But it also, you get to meet strangers with whom you share passion. So it almost feels like you walk into a space with a room where you know nobody. And at the end of a dive, you're besties with everybody because the one thing you all have the same connecting fibers. You're the ocean tribe, and because you're the ocean tribe, you're never alone.
Yeah, it's exactly that. And I actually was talking about this earlier. I went traveling to the Philippines on my own a couple of years ago. And the truth is, you're never actually alone when you go traveling, especially if you're part of the ocean community and you're going traveling to dive. You're never on your own. You'll always meet people. And what I find harder is reaching people that are outside of that community, which I think is really important, is finding people that are not part of that community. But it doesn't take much for people to get interested and to get into the community, and really everyone is part of it. So yeah, no, I love it, and you have so many interesting like conversations with people, and I just love the passion for the ocean, for sharks, and for our planet.
And I love that you mentioned the idea of bringing in people who are not currently part of the ocean community and bringing them in. And I actually found in Bali, the sunsets, just watching the sunsets, right? So it's everybody who's going to go partying later, people who not necessarily have been in the water, but everybody's watching the sunset. And from that first drink of yours to the other person who's standing next to you, and you say, hi, I'm Zandi. So I'm that person. Like, I will fully take up your space. Hi, I'm Zandi. And someone will be like, you know, and I'm like, you know, what are you doing here? And you start having these conversations, and it's a great opportunity to then pour a little bit of your coffee onto the other person, but like in a measured way, so that you don't freak them out. Like in a measured way. Me, I love the ocean a little bit. And then they're like, oh, what does that mean? And then you're like,
And that's the thing, right? Because everyone loves being at the beach. Everyone loves watching sunsets over the ocean. So everyone will find themselves there one day. And so, yeah, so I completely agree. And that's so true about pouring a little bit of your coffee. And I definitely sometimes go a little bit too far and pour all of the coffee and people freak out.
So you have to tell us, how did you get to the ocean space? So how did your falling in love with her story start? Did you grow up in the ocean? How did that start?
Yeah, so I mentioned it earlier. I'm originally from France. My dad is French, my mum is British, and I grew up in a place in France called Brittany, which is on the west coast, and I grew up about a 45-minute drive from the sea. So I was really privileged that we were able to access the sea, you know, whenever we wanted, really. It's not far. And I spent my entire summers on the beach, in the water, and especially me, I spent a lot of time in rock pools looking for everything that lived in there. My brothers would be off building sandcastles, and I'd be like in the rock pools, bent over them. And as soon as I could, I started snorkeling and watching things like Blue Planet, or in my case, what ignited my love for sharks is a movie called Shark Culture, which was made by someone called Rob Stewart, and it's a documentary that he set out to film about sharks in general, and then because he'd grown up diving with them, but when he went back to those places, he found that they'd gone. And so the documentary became about what we were doing to sharks. And I came out of that movie, I already had the love for the ocean, for animals, and for nature. And in this case, I became aware of sharks, and from then on, I went off and became really curious about sharks and started learning about them and fell in love with them completely. And I sort of made it my mission to be a voice for them. And in my 13-year-old naive self, thought that I'd be able to. And I still hope that I can one day with the help of our ocean community.
But isn't that the incredible thing, that, you know, the idea of saving the world is just maybe just starting by saving one, you know? And it sounds crazy, but when the call happens inside of your heart, you realize that you might not be able to hold the entire world between your two hands, but with these two hands, you can start a little bit of motion that moves towards advocacy. And if you just touch one life, it's one life more that is, you know, standing behind you and standing in front of the oceans and saying, we can do better. You know, you've multiplied from 1 to 2, and then you multiply to 5, and then you multiply to 10, and they multiply, right? And our idea is often like so grand when we think about, you know, we want to save the world. We often first see ourselves, but we also take for granted that just that one person who gets inspired inspires another person, and then 1 becomes 10, and 10 become 100, and 100 become 100,000. Before we know it, everybody's saying, don't you even think about, you know, trying that plastic or shark or, you know, whatever it is. How incredible is that, though?
I completely agree. And it's one of the reasons that I love working with Sharks for Kids so much. They're an education organization that whose goal is to create the next generation of ocean and shark advocates. And I completely agree with what you're saying, is that one of the reasons I love it so much is that every single one of the kids that I talk to and I teach about and I teach about religion, they're going off and telling their parents, their brothers, their sisters, their grandparents, and suddenly kids are such a force to be reckoned with. It's very, you know, powerful in the voice that they have. And today, the younger generation are making such amazing things, doing such amazing things. And I really think that really sharing and having conversations and teaching people is one of the biggest ways you can have an influence, a positive influence.
Right? And that's just phenomenal. And I saw that you actually do shark education work, and the little people are the little people who are going to save us and are going to save this planet. And in every single moment when we are, you know, showing them different, and you know, I think it's often a encouraging of what does success look like. It almost feels like, you know, as we're trying to save the ocean and we're trying to save the sharks, it's almost, there's a need for us to redefine what success is, because in the ordinary way, success talks about the American lifestyle, but could we redefine that and look at the little people and, you know, have them thinking about the idea of what could success look like that also saves the planet, like, you know, how these two could work together.
100%. I definitely think that there has to be a major rethink of how our world, how our society, not the world, but our society works, and how it's not going to be about, I think the future isn't going to be about wealth and material things. It's going to be how we can live the most in harmony with our planet. And you know, communities that already do that, I think, are going to be the inspiration for the future. Because there are so many communities out there that are already successful and have been doing that for years and years and hundreds of years, that we have to be looking toward to look for guidance. And the little ones, the little ones always have the creativity and the curiosity. Kids have so much curiosity that at some point in our lives we lose, but that curiosity is what's going to drive the creativity and what we need for the future. So kids, but I also think that it shouldn't be down to kids to save us. We shouldn't get ourselves in such a situation that kids are going to be things that happen, because we shouldn't believe in a to them that they have to save. So it's difficult and it's a complex question. So many people are like looking at it, but you know, I think we all have to work together.
I definitely agree that we all have the responsibility to do the work, right? All of us. And unfortunately, at the rate of technology, you know, the ease with which our lives have become comes a secondary responsibility, and I don't know if we're taking that bit seriously. But thank you to everybody who's joining the live. We are seeing you, we are loving you. If you have any questions, pop them in. We're chatting to Jenny, and she is a marine ecologist, and she is about to tell us, what do marine ecologists do? So you were telling me yesterday that you are studying. Open it up for us.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm a marine biologist, and as a subsection of biology, you have ecology. And ecology is the study of how organisms interact with their environment. So in my case, it's how sharks and whales interact with the place they live. So what they feed on, where they live, what habitats they use, and where they migrate to, and also what effect we're having on them as humans. But it could also be about how microbes or sponges or crabs are interacting with each other and with their environment. So that's ecology as a field, and marine ecology specifically. And I study sharks. and whales a little bit as well. And I'm really interested as well in how, as I said, how we're having an influence on them, and what best ways, by learning about them, how we can help conserve them, and help our oceans in that way.
Sure. So for me, that sounds amazing, because you've just mentioned like two of my favorites. I was saying the other day that I love ribbon-tail rays, round ribbon-tail rays. I love them, but of course, I mean, I love sharks. I mean, one of my bucket list dives is to free dive with a great white. I think that would be so incredible. Not riding its fin, but just to swim with.
Nice to hear you say that.
And there is no shots fired. There is no shots fired, I'm just saying. But for me, it's a mixture of these incredible animals. And I mean, yesterday we said that, you know, sharks are not only the big sharks. There's the pajama sharks and the leopard sharks, and they show up in their beauty in different ways. You know, sometimes they're really small, sometimes they're really big, and it's phenomenal. And my experience with whales, perhaps it starts like a little bit of a tale where we're free diving. I'm learning how to free dive, and for every single time we come down the line, the whales are singing. The whales were singing. So here I am, and I mean, you know, on scuba you get lost in the bubbles.
Yeah.
But in free diving, nothing is lost to anything. So it's this music that goes down with you to 20 meters, and then it comes back with you, and then you go back down and you go a bit deeper. And it, you know, for the first time I had encountered whales in a way that, you know, on scuba, on your GoPro, afterwards you get to hear it, but it was the first time in real life being present to their music. And then on another dive, we had scuba on safety, and as they ran out of air and they got onto the boat, the whales come in closer and they start breaching in every direction. It was insane. So when you talk about, you know, whales and you talk about sharks, I just, like, in my head, I go crazy. So I see Nazoa saying, I read that article by Kat McDonald regarding her experience as a female in the shark science field. Can you relate, and how has your own journey been in this regard? And this is exactly what we're wanting to talk about. Let's tuck in. Let's waste no time. Tuck in.
Yeah, so for anyone who hasn't read it, Dr. Kat McDonald, and you can follow her on social media, she's incredible. But she wrote an article for Scientific American recently about the experience of women and people of color in the field of shark science. And there's a few things that are important to know. One is that on my at my career stage, early career scientists, about 60% of us are actually women. So we're there, but a majority, not all of them, but a majority of senior scientists, the senior shark scientists, are actually white men. And so at some point in our careers, women start dropping out, and Kat sort of, like, what her article talks about is exactly many of the reasons why women drop out, and it's a field that, despite being so female dominated at first, is still seen as being a macho, strong man field, where, because it's all about wrangling sharks, right? That's the perception that people have of us. But also, if you're a shark scientist and you're going out on a boat in the field, these are isolated spaces. And so a lot of women experience sexual harassment, like in the worst cases, sexual assault or abuse of power. I mean, almost every woman in the field that I know of has some form of story, whether it's jokes, sexual jokes that make us feel uncomfortable, whether it's comments about how we're women and we're weaker, so we can't do certain things, or the worst things. And Kat talked about some of them in her article that are just horrific. And I think a lot of us have experienced those things, but we're also we're not going to stand for it anymore. Like
Yeah.
it has to stop, and we shouldn't be made to feel that way. The smallest comment, you know, I've experienced it where I get things taken from me by men in terms of equipment because they think that I'm too weak to carry it myself. But the fact is that if I'm taking it, if I'm carrying it, then I am strong enough to do it. And so, but after a while, all of those things wear us down, and I can completely understand why some women get too fed up of it all and drop out and go into something different. I completely understand it, and I stand with them because it is tiring after a while. And we need to stop finding excuses for those behaviors, and we need men to stop saying that they're surprised that these things happen, because the women in our field have been saying that these things happen for so long that there is no longer an excuse. Yeah.
So I think what's intense is, and I mean, we all know that it's Shark Week this week, and we briefly spoke about it yesterday. So I'm going to ask you to tell us about Shark Week. But for me, the voice that stands up above this whole shark space is it's always the white male voice. I mean, we're going to call it out what it is. And I think for me, you know, representation, and that's what I actually asked you about. I said, you know, how important is representation when we are talking about the ocean arena, and who holds the ownership and authority when it comes to speaking about sharks and ocean facing challenges. And Nazoa pretty much hits the, you know, as she's asking the question, it goes back to what I was going to ask about representation. So how do you think, and I think this is an important question, how do you think we change that, right? So often in educational spaces, what I've learned in my non-educational opinion is that it almost feels like there has to be there's barriers upon barriers upon barriers upon barriers until you are qualified to speak. So like you say that some of the senior guys, you know, some in the senior space is mostly males. And essentially that means that if we hold up to the idea of seniority as a requirement for you to be able to speak on certain things, then we can uphold the ways in which the oppression of women shows itself. So we can always say, you know, you need to be 60 years in the field, and you need to have traveled all continents to have an opinion. You know, the minute we start placing barriers upon barriers in order to make people qualified to speak, how do we start to change the narrative?
Oh my God. There's so much to unpack here, and you're so right about so many of things. And one of the first things I will say is that I have a lot of privilege that others don't. I am a white woman. I come from a background where I could afford to do a lot of things that many others can't. And so for me, a lot of what I do is trying to pay it forward for those reasons. But when you talk about barriers in our field, we talk about financial barriers, where a lot of the experience that scientists tend to have come from internships or volunteerships that are unpaid, that are actually often paid for, you have to pay to do them. And that means that so many people won't be able to do it because they have a family to support, or they have to support. And those things are put in so many.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Can you just say that last bit again?
Yeah, is that better? Okay.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
Yeah, so there are so many barriers in the field of marine biology in general and shark science as well, on top of that, where you have to have field experience to be able to get a job. But you can't get field experience because you have to pay for it, or you have to travel to it. And all of these added barriers mean that it's always going to be the poor, more wealthy users that get access to those things and that get these things, and then in turn get the job. And so, for me, I mean, that's one of the biggest barriers that we have to break down, is to remove those things and find ways to fund people to be able to do this, to get that experience, and to pay them to do the work that they've done to university.
Yeah.
You know, I've always been really frustrated at the fact that I had to pay to do work that I'd gone to university to study and to, you know, learn about. And I was able to do that. Others aren't able to do that. So, and that leads to a field where there are more white people, there are more white men and white women, and that means that on shows like Shark Week, and to talk about Shark Week, for those who don't know, is an annual week-long event of shows on the Discovery Channel all around sharks. And initially it was created as something to spotlight conservation of sharks and to correct the misconceptions around sharks. As the years have gone by, it became a sensationalist, all about entertainment and fiction shows. But I don't know if my sound is okay.
It's okay. Yeah.
And so yeah, as the years gone by, it became a bit more sensationalist, and then scientists started saying you can't keep doing this, and so it's getting a little bit better. There's usually a mix of good shows and bad shows, but the common theme in all of them is the majority of white men scientists, and even when there are female or people, they don't get mentioned in the promo material.
Yeah.
Article, I can't remember what it was. It was a really great article basically laying out the analysing this year's programme and seeing that out of 24 show descriptions, there were only 7 scientists mentioned in the promo, and all of those were men. On the whole week of programming, there are only 2 people of colour. One is Alan Selcott, and the other is Andre Musgrove, and they're amazing, and I think that everyone goes to follow them. People. And the great thing is that they are on the show, Bahamian people, scientists, and shark, and both of them were in the same show in the Bahamas. So I think it's really great to cover the culture of people in their own country. And that's the thing, is that we have shark scientists in all of the countries that there are local scientists in all of those countries. So why aren't they using them? Why aren't they using them? Why aren't they using them? And that's where representation comes in, because how can you expect kids that are watching these shows to believe that there is a place for them in this field and not saying that so
Jenny, are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
I don't know why the line is like so incredibly muffled. So everyone on the live, please just give us some okays if you can hear us properly. But Jenny's just telling us about some of the challenges that we experience just because of barriers to entry, but also representation, talking into Shark Week. So I got you saying that out of a certain number of programs, there were only so many women. Can you just repeat that? And then the representation of Andre Musgrove, which we all know and love. I think it's like a few Bahamian people. And then you're saying that there are people across the world. There's full representation across the world. Can you just say that for me again?
Yeah, so Shark Week had released the promo in their first promo. They had 24 shows. In those 24 show descriptions, there were 7 scientists, and all of those were white male. Whereas actually on the show, on all of the shows, they feature a total of 88 people. And 12 of those, only 12 of those are women. 2 of those 88 people are people of color. And those 2 people of color, and I want to shout out Andre Musgrove and Alana Velicott. I hope I'm not butchering her name, but Alana Velicott. And I really recommend you all go and follow them. But they're 2 Bahamian shark experts and scientists, and they got featured in a show with the organization, I think it was on last night, and Dr. Austin Gallagher, and they're incredible, and they deserve a place on there. And so many other shark activists and shark experts deserve a place on these shows to be represented. What I was saying is that they're out there. And, there's a fantastic organisation that recently started up called that was founded by 4 women of colour. So Jada Elcott, Carly Jackson, Jasmine Graham, and Amani Webershaw. And so these 4 women, 4 young women, early career, created this organisation called Miss Erasmo, in shark science. And in the first month that they started, they got 65 members. They're now up in the 80s. And this is all scientists that are out there studying, and that are people of colour, knowledge background. And so that just goes to prove that those people are out there and they deserve the place. And why aren't we showing them? Why aren't we showing that white males?
Yeah.
You know, I know so many people in Ecuador, Mexico, the Galapagos, and every single year has in those places.
Yeah.
And I often see my friends on those days. It's really important taken out there to do science. But that's wrong because there are people focusing there already. So why aren't we using them?
So, like, you've properly hit the nail on the head on like all of the issues, right? And I 100% agree with you. And it almost feels like this is not the right thing to say, but I'm gonna say it anyway. It almost feels like it's one black person at a time. So it's almost like there can't be a full realization of the space, but we can only do one at a time. And, you know, Andre, we all know Andre, and he does phenomenal work. And I almost want to say that, is it not, you know, I feel like Andre also shows up in the more important way as well, that says the only education, how do I say this properly? You don't only know about sharks because you are a scientist. You could have lived with them your entire life, part one. You could be knowledgeable, not in the traditional and Western way. You could be an expert on sharks and ecology and spaces because you've lived in that particular space. Like, I think it's AMA. They are a set of women who are freedivers, and they have been freediving for 50, 60 years, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's the idea of exploring who is authority to speak as well, because can you imagine what they could tell you about their oceans in their experience and years of diving, right? So it might not tie back to the traditional aspect of who is qualified to speak, but their insights are also incredibly valuable. In the same way that Andre Musgrove is a underwater film guy, and I don't know if he's like, you know, massively educated in the sciences of the marine space, but in the way in which I've encountered him, it's not on the science aspect, but in the art space. So he's creating beautiful underwater art, and he's a spear fisherman. So at any point, he also has an incredible amount of knowledge. about the ocean. So we almost, you know, when we talk about barriers, you know, you're right. You talk about the idea that you study, and then after you study, you have to go travel, and then you have to be a part of an internship where you need to pay in to be a part of that internship. And all of these things make you more qualified to speak than anyone else that you would have graduated with. But, you know, there's the thing that says, but people also have to put bread on the table. So it's that constant flow of, it's that constant flow of privilege meeting education, meeting the barriers that are continuously raised, which then, you know, we get to the place where we say, but why is there no authority that is Black, that is a female, that is both, you know, all of those. When we start to look into the different intersectionality of the space, we kind of realize that the system is upheld because, you know, for as long as we keep on putting on barriers, we make sure that representation minimizes. The people who filter through are like 1 in 100 or 1 in 1,000.
Okay, yes, so many aspects. I really want to touch on this idea that I don't know if you've ever heard of Ashad Devo. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it. He wrote an amazing article recently about colonial science, and the fact that a lot of the time scientists will fly out and travel to a place and carry out science, not involve the locals, and then go away, and there's no benefit to the community, and it's entirely done in a way that doesn't involve locals, which those local communities have so much knowledge that we don't tap into as scientists. And it's one of the biggest flaws of science is that we're not collaborating enough with the communities that we're in the most. So when we're talking about conservation science, scientists and policymakers go out and they put rules and regulations in that we think are going to protect us. But on the flip side of that, what's happening is that a lot of communities are suffering because they've lost their livelihood or for whatever other. And somewhere along the line, scientists are collaborating with policymakers. They're not collaborating enough with communities and the other side of the stakeholders. And I think it's one of the places that science can improve the work in collaboration. And after people finished it by saying every coastline needs collaboration. And the pandemic actually has been one of the ways to demonstrate this, because so many scientists that were going collecting their data from faraway places can't reach those places anymore, and they have no way to collect their data. Whereas if they'd involved their local community and collaborated with local scientists, then they'd still be able to get their data and they don't go for the year or figures. And yeah, so I think that's one of the huge problems that's one of the biggest mistakes that scientists make now. And when I say scientists, I mean Western white scientists, you know. And obviously there are scientists everywhere, and as I said, in those countries there are scientists already there working. It is just, I'm just talking about from colonial, colonial that.
So it's actually interesting. The beach co-op, they have had, through this week, they've been chatting to various women. They had a series called Woman and Water, and Nazoa actually is the one who raised what you are talking about now, where she said there's this helicopter approach. You come from wherever it is that you come in, you swoop the information that you've come to get, you don't involve the locals, and then you leave and you publish your paper. And she was saying that it's actually quite interesting how, like, in places like in Mozambique, whatever you publish, they don't even acknowledge. So you've gone, you've swooped in, you've gotten your information, and however valuable and true and pressing and important, whatever it is that you picked up, they just don't even look into it because you bypassed an entire nation to helicopter in and helicopter out, which is crazy, because I mean, like you say, there are scientists everywhere, and somehow this pandemic is changing the way that we've always done things, to kind of stop and say, but hold on, I had a friend who was actually saying he had a feature, and because the publication couldn't get to where he was at, they had to outsource the work to a local company to do it. And I kind of sat there and I said, well, good riddance. We love that you are able to shine, right? But how incredible is it when you're able to empower the local economy as well? We're talking, and I mean, yes, there's spaces where skills are not possible, but in the greater aspect of content creation, and when you look at photographers, they're all in plenty, but when you stop to say, okay, we are based in the Americas, and naturally all of us would come to make this soiree, but now it's kind of like we can actually empower local companies who have proved competence, and how beautiful is that, right? Like, I think it's awesome.
Yeah, and it shouldn't have taken a pandemic for this to happen. And we should be raising people up and giving power to the local community. And in fact, some of the most successful conservation projects in the world have been when people have given power to those local communities and have to their knowledge. So yeah, like it blows my mind that this is still happening, and I can complicit in it, I'm sure. I mean, I've volunteered for local possibilities and the Bahamas, and so yes, I've been guilty of it, and I think that one, it's important for me to acknowledge that, but for me to pay it for it and have to make it so that it doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So I love that you keep on talking about paying it forward. For me, that's kind of important, because conversations like this are like super important. Like, I'm encouraged by this discussion, and I mean, I already love the work that you do. That I follow you, I like all of your stuff. But just to be able to conversate and share space and share community and kind of say, hey, we have a problem in certain spaces, and we realize it, and we are all aware of it. And I mean, I often say this, like, you don't get to be more aware of it because actually, oftentimes it's black and brown people who'll be more aware of it first before everyone else kind of picks up to it. And you kind of saying, hey, we do have a problem, for me is encouraging, because it says the narrative is continuously changing, and it's up to us, like in the beginning of our discussion, as to how we change that, right? So I don't know, do you have any ideas around how we increase representation, and how do we kind of change up the way things have always been done to open up space for more inclusion? How does that look?
It's a great question, and it's something that I'm learning a lot about and trying to figure out for myself. I think from my position, it's giving up my voice to someone else. So whenever I can, is raising someone else's voice instead of taking the narrative for myself. So whether it's on social media or medium, is this is a place where maybe I shouldn't be talking, and I should be giving my voice to someone else.
Sure.
I think it's mentoring for me is a huge one. I really hope that I can be a mentor towards people, younger people in the future, and help them get to a place where I've had the privilege of being without a mentor.
Sure.
And for us to always continuously ask the media to represent to have a more diverse representation. I think it would be stupid for staff to existed to ignore the voices saying to them, this is wrong, you need to, because there are so many places out there that are talented and paid. There is so many more diverse scientists, so many more diverse starts. We need to change this. Well, this is actually detrimental to sharks, not positive. Now, I'm not talking for all the shows because, as I said, some of them are really good. But I think we need to continue to require them to hold them accountable. Yeah. So and also there are, as I've mentioned, a few organisations, especially missing out. And for me, from my position, supporting an organisation like that is going to be one of the biggest ways that I think. It's donating, it's raising their voice, it's giving them a space. It, you know, all of those things that I think are that we can help change the field.
Yeah, so I love that. So you're saying at certain moments when I'm given a platform, I can share the platform, so share it with another to diversify the space. To your mentorship is a phenomenal aspect because, you know, people learn and start to care about things when they are exposed to them. And if you're in a position to be able to mentor someone to the position that you're at, that is incredible. And then you're saying following organizations like Miss Elasmo and donating to and kind of lifting up their platform as well, so that they can also become an authority in the space because they've got the education and they've got all of the
100%.
Yeah. And I love that. And I'm going to pin it in our conversation just as a reminder of the work that we can continuously do. But as we slowly come to a close, tell us about sharks. So yesterday you were saying there's over 500 species of sharks. So hold on, as we close that, I don't know if anybody has any questions, but thank you for joining. And I think the representation discussion is always important, but everything is a dance and we are continuously dancing. So tell us about sharks and the amount of species we have and some important facts as we sit in Shark Week. We can see it all over our social, you know. Tell us more.
Cool. Yeah. So how can I talk about sharks in a short amount of space? I'll try and rise to the challenge. So yeah, there are in the world, on Shark Week, you'll see primarily species like great white sharks or tiger sharks or bull sharks or hammerhead sharks. Those are the species you'll see the most of. They do have some good shows, again, like Alien Sharks from last year, but we have to know that there are over 500 species of sharks and over 1,200 species of whales. So a huge amount of diversity in sharks. And they live in almost every ocean, from the very deep sea to the Arctic sea. They live in rivers as well. You know, some species of sharks and rays live in rivers. And of all of that diversity of sharks, we have some that are critically endangered, some that are very endangered, and over recent years, we've actually shown that many species have declined by over 90%. So they're in real trouble, but they're really important to our oceans because they're predators, not always apex predators. Very often they hold a place that is in the middle of the food chain, but they all play a role in their environment like every animal does. And whether that's regulating fish populations by making sure that they don't get too out of hand, and so feeding on them, by feeding on the sick or the injured, or even, and one of the biggest ways that sharks have an impact on their environment is through their behavior. So when a shark is there, the behaviors of other fish are going to change whether they're there or not. So, for example, on seagrass beds, seagrass is a really important ecosystem for our oceans, for our planet, and for us, because they're nursery grounds, the fish that we feed on. They're also carbon absorbers, so they play a really important role in CO2 emissions, and so for climate change, it's really important. And sharks and sea turtles will feed on seagrass. But when sharks are there, those sea turtles, they get scared of the shark, and so they leave the seagrass. And so they're not overeating the seagrass. So the shark has a really important role in that case, because it's scaring the turtle away, and it's making sure that the seagrass keeps growing and stay healthy. And that's just one example of the roles that sharks play in our oceans. They also recycle nutrients from water. You know, they have so many really important roles, and we're killing them at unprecedented rates because we eat their meat, we sell their fins, we put them in cosmetic products. I was telling you yesterday about the fact that many people don't realize that in their makeup or in their moisturizing cream, there is actually sometimes shark in there. And so one of the biggest things that people can do to help sharks is to look at ingredient lists on their cosmetic products to see if the word squalene is in there. And if it's on there, does it say if it's from plants, or does it not say? And can you investigate where it's actually come from? You can always make sure that you know where the fish that is in your plate has come from, how it's been caught, and if you're sure you know what species it is. There was a study a few years back that showed that in the UK, in fish and chip shops, people thought they were eating cod, whereas a lot of the time they were actually eating shark meat, and they weren't really. Yeah, because shark is very often in many countries around the world sold under different names. In our case, it might be rock salmon. In other places, it might be a different name, and it's a name that is used to disguise the fact that you're actually eating shark. So it's why it's really important that you know what is in your plate. Because the other thing that has a huge impact on shark populations is bycatch. For those who don't know, bycatch is in fisheries, fishers will have a target species, but anything they catch besides that species is called bycatch. And in some fisheries, bycatch, there can be more bycatch than there is of the target species. And that either goes to waste or it goes in your pet food. You might have shark in your dog or your cat. And so all of this can seem really overwhelming. There's so much to think about. And what we were saying yesterday is that not everyone's going to be perfect, but every little thing you can do can have a really big impact. So you can talk to your parents, talk to your family, try and look at all of these things and see where you can help, where you can make a difference. What's one thing that you can change in your life that is going to have a positive impact?
Sure.
So that's a really quick overview of some of the issues.
So I love that so much. So you're saying pick one thing in your life that you can change that will bring a positive impact. And it almost goes back to the discussion that we had in Plastic Free July, where we were saying the idea is not perfection. The idea is every single day doing something that, you know, it's about the best that you can do, because many people kind of want to make it like a perfection thing, a pie in the sky thing. And then when you mess up, it feels like you've lost all motivation. But essentially you are building a habit, and building a habit is just that, picking one thing and just kind of following through on it daily.
Yeah.
And you said check your cosmetic products, make sure that they don't have any, you know, shark pieces in them or made with shark flesh, and check where your fish comes from. So when you're buying your fish, make sure that you know what's on your plate. And
the great thing about fish is that there's so many apps out there Like we have the Good Fish app, the Good Fish guide over in the UK, but there are a number of different ones depending on where you live that tell you if the fish you're eating is sustainable or not. And those are a great place to start. Is the fish that you have in your plate on that app, and is it classed as sustainable or not on that app? And if it isn't sustainable, can you actually just stop it so that you're not making a drastic change, but you're making a small change that will have a difference?
Yeah. And so in South Africa, we have an app called WWF. That call came in because I did like the do not disturb, but we've got an app called WWF Sassy, and on there you get to know what kind of fish you can eat, what's endangered, what's not, which is a fantastic app to get.
Yeah, and it's such an easy thing to do to make sure that you're not adding any pressure on our ocean and try and be as sustainable. I mean, the best thing you could possibly do is stop eating fish, but I accept that a lot of people are not willing to do that. And even I still eat fish from time to time, but I try and make it so that it's fish that I've caught myself, which is why I actually have no issue with spearfishing, because what spearfishers catch, they're going to eat themselves, and it's going to feed them for a few days or a whole family. And it's one of the most sustainable ways that you can catch it. And I think that's also is actually something really important that I want to touch on, is that a lot of shark scientists out there and shark conservationists don't advocate for a complete ban on shark fishing. They try and find ways that shark fisheries are going to be sustainable. It's really hard with sharks because they're slow growing and they don't really produce much. But there are some species that can be caught in a sustainable way. And so, I mean, that's different people are going to have different opinions, but if you can't ask everyone to stop the way they're living, there are small local communities of fishermen, fishing communities out there that completely rely on sharks to survive. And you can't ask them who have fished for generations and generations, who have been out there catching sharks. You can't ask them to switch completely from one day to another and not eat sharks anymore. You have to find ways to work with them to make sure that you're finding the most sustainable practices.
And I think it goes back to one of the comments that we got yesterday that said, the upholding of a capitalist system means that it's difficult to be able to make changes like that, because, and that's what you're saying, that some people are saying, yes, we're not fighting for all sharks, just some sharks, which is kind of like a trick, because, and again, it also says, how do we protect the ocean while we protect the communities that live around the ocean, who have always, survived in one way or another, be it catching fish or sharks? How do we make it work?
It's all about, and I think it comes back to this idea that to make sure that sharks and humans can live in harmony on the planet. And so we're predators, we're going to eat animals. I mean, some people won't, some people do, but I think it's inconceivable that everyone's going to stop eating animals from one day to the other. I can ensure that those who do still eat fish but still eat animals can do it the most sustainably possible, so that our populations of sharks don't decline but are stable.
Yeah. Well, that is our time. I see Instagram is giving us a 30-second countdown. Thank you so much for the party. I can't believe it's already been an hour, but it has been so phenomenal to have you. Thank you so much for making sure that we could redo this live. That is so important. And I think we're all so much more educated. I don't know if you have anything to say that's like 5 seconds.
Yeah, no, I just want to say thank you so much for having me. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to drop me a message, a comment, and I'm always open to discussing things. And